Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I hope you liked our first two segments because those are the only two SEC teams. I wanted to look at these two newcomers heading in drastically different directions before we get into the big boys of the SEC. But now we transition to the ACC, and a team, like I said and talked about yesterday when I did the college football player profile of DJ Uiagalelei, their new QB, is in flux after an exciting last year that ended in heartbreaking fashion as they were snubbed from the CFP due to fate of circumstance. Florida State is in kind of a reset mode. And an ACC that, like I mentioned yesterday as well, it's also in flux. Can Florida State take advantage of that? Or will this new amalgamation of players really not find their fit on the field? I think that the over-under for them might be a little bit skeptical to some, because after a 13-0 season where Jordan Travis really rejuvenated this program, they lose him for that little stretch run where they were trying to compete for the CFP and go undefeated, to now where you now have a QB who hasn't really impressed people when everyone thought he was going to be a future star in college football, and a team that lost so much of what made it so hopeful, that you're now kind of staring down at this team that doesn't look like anything that can compete right now. And this year especially, it could be the final year of the ACC if no one from this conference really makes a CFP challenge outside of the champion. What will Florida State ultimately take away from this 2-year period? The fact that they had reached the highest of highs and gone 13-0, the fact that they got snubbed just because their QB went down, or this season where they really look like they could be in semi-dire straits. Now, let me tell you the win totals and over-unders. It's 9.5 wins, which could be enough for an at-large bid. But you have to understand, when we talk about all the moves that the SEC and Big Ten made to make sure that their conferences were the cream of the crop, no matter what issues with money they will face down the line. And you look at the ACC and what they've done in return. They really haven't made a positive imprint in terms of taking advantage of the 12-team CFP. And all three of the teams I'm going to talk about today do have a solid chance of being contenders for the CFP. But a lot needs to happen from now until Selection Sunday for the ACC to really be considered. And that all starts with the top two teams we're going to be talking about, and then a sleeper pick at the end of the show. And let's start off with Florida State. 9.5 wins should be manageable for Florida State. When I look at this team, I don't necessarily see a lot of talent that DJ Uiagalelei can hold his standard to. Because when DJ Uiagalelei was at Oregon State, right? That team was more predicated around finding ways to make him more comfortable. And as a result, while he did not produce as much stats as people would have liked, he did, lead them to a nice season, got them into the top 25. But Florida State seems like a different kind of situation. And I mentioned this yesterday with him as well, because DJ Uiagalelei, at the end of the day, is a quarterback who doesn't necessarily fit the profile of someone who should lead a Power 5 conference team. He definitely feels like someone who kind of needs that kind of smaller school mentality, who can sneak their way into the top 25, because that's what he did with Oregon State. This certainly feels like a weird fit. But if anything, one silver lining to this all is that Mike Norvell really believes in him. If he saw that in the transfer portal, he was looking at QBs, could have had some other guys. If he really believed in DJ Uiagalelei enough that he chose him as the quarterback to kind of make people forget about Jordan Travis, then that shows the level of confidence Mike Norvell has in his program and most importantly himself. Because that's what I think that the ACC is going to come down to this year, coaching. A lot of people don't necessarily want coaching to come into their mindset of how they view certain teams and how they're going to bet on them. But coaching in the SEC is no different. All three of these coaches have cultural understandings of their teams. And they also understand what it takes to lead a team where you're either in transition or you're at the top. And when I think about Mike Norvell and what he did last year to kind of bolster his team through the thick and the thin. And when he heard that he was not selected, he didn't necessarily panic. He knew it was highway robbery, and he mentioned such later on, but he didn't panic. From that moment forward, he knew that he was going to lose all that production. He knew that Jordan Travis was gone. He knew that Keon Coleman was gone. He knew that Johnny Wilson was gone. He started planning. And if those plans include DJ Uiagalelei, so be it. A lot of Florida State faithful may not like that decision. But believing in Mike Norvell is a decision that a lot of people should like making, because Mike Norvell, at the end of the day, is a fantastic football coach. To lead a team through that time shows the savvy and moxie that is needed when you're leading an ACC team that already has a chip on its shoulder going into the season after all of the situations surrounding it and other conferences this past offseason. Now let's get into the schedule for them, because it is an interesting schedule. And there is a lot of margin for error here, I will admit. It allows for a lot of margin for error should, DJ not come out of the gate swinging. They're at Miami and they're at Notre Dame. Those are two big road games for them. And looking at Miami and Notre Dame, they are in the same kind of boat here. Miami we'll talk about a little later, but Notre Dame is the game that I'm more intrigued by because they're very similar situations. Florida State could have gone out and gotten Riley Leonard if you really think about it. But no, he ended up at Notre Dame, and injury history be damned, he still is one of the best college football QBs you could have had in the transfer portal last year. And so I'd love to see if DJ Uiagalelei doesn't play well in that game, what Florida State fans will really hold their hand on the ear. Because if they look at if Riley Leonard also plays well in this game, then that's huge trouble for Florida State. Because that's the game where I think a lot of people might lose faith if DJ doesn't play very well, because they need to win games like this on the road at teams they feel like they should win against in order to do that. And then Miami, another similar thing. I don't necessarily think that Cam Ward is one of those guys who would have liked to play for Florida State. He wants to go to maybe a school where he gets a lot of national attention because he's leveraging himself to be a top pick in the 25 NFL draft. But, it could be an interesting game. But those two games are the games where Florida State's season hinges on belief. Because if they win those games, then I feel like you're building something that a lot of people can believe in and you can get fans behind. If you don't, that I don't think you really can. You get Clemson at home. That could be the game that truly decides who's going to represent the ACC in the championship game, and furthermore, as the automatic bid in the CFP. So that game also very important. And I think that as of this moment, Florida State can really say that they're a little bit ahead of the game in terms of Clemson here, because Clemson has a lot of questions too. We're going to talk about their whole coaching situation when I talk about them in the next segment. But when I look at Clemson and I look at Florida State, I feel it's Florida State at least, had a contingency plan after their star quarterback left. They at least have confidence in DJ. Right now, I don't see any confidence coming out of Clemson. I feel that Dabo Swinney might be losing his head a little bit there, keeping Cade Klubnik there for as long as he has. And I think that if you don't see improvement there, that could be an easy win for Florida State, and that could be a confidence booster. It's all about making sure that Florida State has the confidence, and that falls on Mike Norvell's shoulders. Because Mike Norvell created a belief last year that really carried Florida State through thick and thin. And remember, Florida State had some close calls last year against teams they shouldn't be losing against. They really did. And because of Mike Norvell, they really stayed the course. They didn't lose faith whenever things got a little bit bumpy along the road. And this year, I feel like there's more opportunity for that to happen. Because Mike Norvell said, okay, guys, we lost some of our best players on the offensive side of the football. We lost our best defensive player, for that matter. But I'm bringing in guys who I feel we should believe in, because we don't want to let our faithful down and be guys that shy away from the pressure. We want to embrace it. And if they lose a couple games, so be it. They certainly feel like they could lose to Miami and Notre Dame this season. And that's why I'm skeptical about this over-under here. I don't really know how to handle it, because 9.5 wins certainly feels like a very interesting benchmark for a Florida State team like this. And so the main goal for this season shouldn't be about the wins or losses. It should be about maintaining and carrying over that faith in the team. Because at the end of the day, coaching was what got them to that point. They are fantastic players in their own right, but coaching at the end of the day is going to decide the ACC championship and also the future of the ACC as well. And Florida State is the prime example of that. That's just about do it for this segment. Coming next, we transition to the other ACC hopeful, perhaps the weaker of the two, perhaps the weaker of the three if we bring in our last team for our last segment. But we will definitely see. We'll be right back after this short break.